Nestled within a picturesque valley, the neighborhood of Maplewood Crest was a place where charm met conformity. With tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and homes painted in soft pastels, it was the quintessential suburban haven. The gentle hum of children's laughter intertwined with the chirping of birds, creating an idyllic soundscape that welcomed resident home after long days at work. However, beneath this veneer of tranquility lay a strict regime. The Homeowners Association, HOA, managed by a small group of dedicated volunteers. The HOA imposed a myriad of rules intended to preserve the aesthetic integrity and property values of the community. Residents found themselves bound by guidelines dictating everything from paint colors to acceptable landscaping choices. While some appreciated the order and uniformity these regulations provided, others began to feel stifled by what they viewed as excessive control. At the heart of this governance was a stalwart member known colloquially as HOA Karen, whose unwavering dedication to enforcing compliance bordered on obsession. With her clipboard always at hand, she roamed the neighborhood like a vigilant hall monitor, ready to pounce on any infraction, whether it was a slightly overgrown hedge or an incorrectly placed garden gnome. Her fierce commitment left many residents exasperated yet wary. They knew better than to cross her. Among those struggling with HOA Karen's reign was the protagonist, an ordinary resident who took pride in their home but had recently become ensnared in the web of local regulations. Their resourcefulness had led them to invest in a snowplow, rationalized as a necessary tool for winters that often blanketed Maplewood Crest in heavy snow. This contraption promised freedom during harsh storms and assurance that their family could remain safe and accessible when others might be stranded. However, not everyone shared this sentiment. When HOA Karen caught wind of the new snowplow parked in their driveway, she exploded into action. Armed with her rulebook and her penchant for nitpicking, she deemed it an unsightly hazard that threatened neighborhood cohesion. A string of complaints cascaded from this decision, leading to an official ban on its use, all while she maintained that such measures were for the good of the community. As winter deepened and forecasts hinted at impending storms, tension simmered just beneath surface-level civility in Maplewood Crest, a powder keg waiting for the perfect storm, both literally and figuratively. In the heart of Maplewood Crest, HOA Karen stood as an unyielding sentinel of order. With her perfectly coiffed hair and a wardrobe that screamed authority, often adorned with pastel blazers that blended with the neighborhood's aesthetic, she was both a figure of respect and a source of frustration among the residents. Her presence was felt in every corner of the community, from the meticulously arranged flower beds to the uniformity of mailbox designs. To many, she embodied the ideals of suburban living, but to others, she was a tyrant in a floral-patterned tyranny. Karen had spent years serving on the HOA board, cultivating an image of unwavering dedication to preserving the neighborhood's charm. She viewed herself as a guardian of tradition, often citing the good of the community as justification for her relentless enforcement of rules. Whether it was a neighbor's choice of holiday decorations or the height of their grass, nothing escaped her watchful eye. Many residents had learned to tiptoe around her, fearing the repercussions of any perceived deviation from her standards. Her clipboard was her constant companion, a tool she wielded like a sword in battle. As she patrolled the streets, she would jot down notes and compile lists of infractions, ready to pounce on anyone who dared defy her vision. Her disdain for anything deemed untidy or unconventional was palpable. She often remarked that a single robed dandelion could ruin the neighborhood's reputation. This unwavering adherence to rules was both her strength and her weakness. While it maintained order, it also alienated those who felt oppressed by her oversight. Among those caught in Karen's crosshairs was a protagonist who had unwittingly become a target for her scrutiny. When they opted to invest in a snowplow to navigate the harsh winters, it felt like a practical decision born out of necessity. However, Karen viewed it as an affront to her carefully curated image of perfection. Her reaction was swift and ruthless. She unleashed a torrent of complaints against the snowplow, deeming it an eyesore that threatened to disrupt the serene landscape. As winter approached and whispers of an impending blizzard circulated through Maplewood Crest, Karen's resolve only intensified. She ramped up her patrols and began holding meetings filled with discussions about community standards, all while ignoring the growing discontent among residents regarding her heavy-handed approach. While some neighbors were prepared to rally against her reign, others remained paralyzed by fear, unsure of how to challenge her authority without inciting further wrath. Little did Karen know that her stringent rule over the snowplow would soon lead to unforeseen consequences as nature began to unleash its fury. As winter settled over Maplewood Crest, the protagonists found themselves increasingly at odds with HOA Karen regarding their newly acquired snowplow. Initially, they had felt a sense of pride in their purchase, believing it to be a practical solution for navigating the heavy snowfall that was a hallmark of the season. Yet, what began as a simple investment soon spiraled into a battle of wills. The trouble started on an ordinary Tuesday morning when Karen decided to pay one of her routine visits to inspect compliance within the neighborhood. Dressed in her signature pastel blazer, clipboard clutched in hand, she approached the protagonist's home with an air of authority that sent a shiver down their spine. Her hawkish gaze was zeroed in on the very object that was meant to bring convenience and safety, the snowplow, parked prominently in the driveway. "Excuse me," she began sharply, almost before even setting foot on the property. "That contraption is not permitted under Section 3B of our HOA bylaws regarding vehicle regulations." Her voice dripped with condescension as she gestured toward the snowplow, her determination palpable. Confused and frustrated, the protagonist attempted to explain their reasoning. "But it's essential for keeping our driveway clear during storms. I thought it would be beneficial for everyone." They hoped to appeal to Karen's sense of community spirit, but that proved futile. Karen cut them off with an imperious wave of her hand. "This isn't about what you think is best. It's about maintaining property values and aesthetic standards. The snowplow is unsightly and disrupts the neighborhood's charm." Her words hung heavily in the air as if they were undeniable truths set in stone. After a tense exchange filled with back-and-forth arguments and Karen's unwavering citations of various HOA rules, she concluded with a stern ultimatum. "You must remove it immediately or face penalties." Feeling cornered and powerless against her relentless authority, the protagonist could only watch as Karen sauntered away triumphantly, clipboard full of notes detailing their violation. It didn't take long for word to spread through the neighborhood about the ban on their snowplow, stirring mixed reactions among residents. Some expressed sympathy and concern for the protagonist's situation, while others felt relief that Karen's watchful eye had intervened. As whispers circulated and tensions mounted within Maplewood Crest, all eyes were soon turned toward nature itself. With meteorologists predicting a blizzard that could blanket the area in feet of snow, uncertainty loomed larger than ever, especially for those who had underestimated the impact of HOA Karen's iron rule. The morning after the tense confrontation with HOA Karen, the reality of the situation hit the protagonist like a cold gust of wind. They woke up hopeful that perhaps it had all been a bad dream, but as they glanced out the window and saw the snowplow still parked in their driveway, it was clear that was not the case. A sinking feeling settled in their stomach as they recalled Karen's ultimatum and the looming threat of penalties. Later that day, an official-looking envelope slid through the mail slot, its presence foreboding. The protagonist hesitated before opening it, an ominous dread building within. Inside was a formal notice from the HOA, written in Karen's signature precise style. The words jumped off the page: "Violation of Section 3B regarding unauthorized vehicles." The notice outlined their offense in stark detail and demanded the immediate removal of the snowplow from their property. Failure to comply would result in fines and possible further action by the association. A mixture of anger and disbelief surged through them. This was more than just about a snowplow. It felt deeply personal. They thought about all the conversations with neighbors who had expressed sympathy about the winter weather, how this snowplow could provide safety not just for them, but create ease for anyone else who might be in need during storms. Did Karen really think that aesthetics outweighed practicality? Word spread quickly among residents, igniting a firestorm of opinions. Some stood firmly behind HOA Karen, supporting her vision for maintaining neighborhood standards, while others expressed confusion over why such a practical tool would be deemed unacceptable. Heated discussions erupted during evening gatherings at local coffee shops or around backyard fire pits, with neighbors weighing in on the fairness, or lack thereof, of the situation. As the blizzard approached, anticipation morphed into anxiety for the protagonist. They had come to rely on the idea of using the snowplow for safety and accessibility when even minor storms could create significant disruptions. The notice now loomed over them like a dark cloud, underscoring their frustration at being marginalized by Karen's rules. Meanwhile, amid debates amongst residents about Karen's enforcement practices and pushback regarding her authority, one thing became increasingly clear. An impending storm threatened to blanket Maplewood Crest with deep snow that would challenge even a well-prepared community. Would HOA Karen's strict adherence to rules hold up against nature's fury, or would she find herself at the mercy of her own rigid regulations? The tension in Maplewood Crest reached a boiling point as everyone braced for what lay ahead. As the days passed, foreboding weather forecasts began to dominate conversations in Maplewood Crest. Meteorologists warned of an impending blizzard that was poised to blanket the area in heavy snow, with predictions estimating accumulations of up to 2 feet. The warnings sent a ripple of anxiety through the community, intensifying the already simmering tension surrounding HOA Karen's recent ban on the protagonist's snowplow. With each passing hour, glances at the news became more frequent and more frantic. Residents gathered in groups at local coffee shops and front porches, anxiously discussing how this storm could disrupt their daily lives. The air was thick with speculation. Stories circulated about past storms that had left neighbors stranded for days, particularly in homes buried under thick drifts. Many began to realize that maneuverability was key during such harsh winters, leading to a growing chorus of discontent regarding the snowplow ban. In contrast to the communal unease, HOA Karen remained steadfast in her beliefs. With her clipboard always at hand, she saw no need to reconsider her stance on enforcement, even as others questioned her judgment. Instead, she scheduled an emergency HOA meeting to reiterate her commitment to neighborhood standards and address any concerns residents might have about potential deviations during the storm. "We must preserve our values," she declared at one gathering, her words landing like stone-hearted mandates rather than reassurances. However, in hushed tones among neighbors, a different perspective emerged. Why not focus on survival and safety instead of appearances? Many began to wonder if Karen's strict adherence to aesthetic principles was worth it when faced with a natural disaster looming on the horizon. As meteorologists updated their forecasts throughout the day, concerns shifted from mere inconveniences to questions regarding emergency preparedness. Residents exchanged thoughts about making arrangements for snow removal or reaching out for assistance should they find themselves trapped by drifts blocking their driveways. Their anxiety mounted as they collectively prepared for what lay ahead, a storm that threatened not just property, but also personal safety. In those moments of mingled fear and solidarity, whispers grew louder about challenging HOA Karen's rules. The stakes were higher than before. Glaring at each other through frosted windows became less about neighborly disputes and more about ensuring mutual support in times of trial. As snowflakes began dancing in the cold air outside and predictions painted an ominous picture for Maplewood Crest, one thing became increasingly clear. Nature had plans of its own that would test both resilience and community spirit when they needed it most. As the blizzard forecast loomed closer, the atmosphere in Maplewood Crest became increasingly charged with tension and urgency. Residents gathered in small groups, discussing their concerns about the approaching storm and Karen's recent ban on the snowplow. The community was divided. Some felt that Karen's rules were necessary to maintain order, while others began to recognize the absurdity of prioritizing aesthetics over practicality in the face of a significant weather event. On one side of Main Street, a group of longtime residents gathered outside Mary's Cafe, their faces etched with worry. "I can't believe she's putting rules ahead of our safety," whispered Janet, a mother of 3 who had lived in Maplewood Crest for over a decade. "What good are her precious standards when my kids can't even get out for school?" Her words echoed the sentiments of many. Frustration simmered beneath the surface as they considered how quickly conditions could deteriorate. Conversely, on the other side of town, a few staunch supporters of HOA Karen defended her perspective. "We need someone to uphold community standards," said Tim, a neighbor proud of his manicured lawn. "If we let one person slide on regulations, what's next? A cluttered neighborhood." His comments ignited heated rebuttals as others argued that survival and safety should take precedence over appearances. As discussions grew more passionate, whispers turned to calls for action. More than ever, residents began contemplating how they could band together, not just to support the protagonist, but to challenge Karen's heavy-handed approach. Could they unite against her as a collective voice? Many started preparing materials for a neighborhood meeting intended to address both the impending storm and their grievances with Karen's rigid enforcement policies. Meanwhile, at HOA meetings scheduled to discuss holiday decorations and property upkeep amidst rumors about myriad violations, Karen remained oblivious to dissent brewing among her neighbors. Her focus remained squarely on protocol and maintaining decorum, even as unease spread through every block. While she stood at the front giving updates about preserving property values, many others were secretly drafting their plans for advocacy. As snowflakes began to swirl through the air in advance of the storm, emotions ran high. For some residents, it was not only about the snowplow ban anymore. It was about asserting their voice against an authority they viewed as excessive and unyielding. They understood that if they did not take a stand now, during this critical moment, their community could become divided not only by winter weather, but by rigid rules that no longer serve its people. In those final hours before the blizzard struck Maplewood Crest, uncertainty loomed large. Would they rise together or allow fear to keep them silent? As neighbors prepared for what lay ahead, one thing became clear. This storm would test not just the strength of their homes, but also the resilience of their community spirit amidst adversity. The blizzard swept into Maplewood Crest with a ferocity that took residents by surprise. What had begun as gentle flurries quickly escalated into a relentless torrent of snow, blanketing the quaint neighborhood in a thick layer of white. The wind howled like a living creature, whipping through the tree branches and creating eerie whistling sounds that sent chills down spines. Visibility diminished rapidly. Street lamps barely pierced through the swirling flakes, turning the once familiar streets into an unrecognizable winter wonderland. Within hours, snowdrifts formed, mounting near sidewalks and doorsteps, each pile growing taller as the storm raged on. What started as mere inches of accumulation transformed into formidable barriers that concealed cars beneath heavy layers. Residents peered through frosted windows, and their collective anxiety grew as they noted how quickly snow piled against their front doors, making it increasingly difficult to step outside. The quietness of being snowed and settled upon the community like an unwelcome blanket. The sound of shovels scraping against pavement and muffled voices filled the air as some residents bravely ventured to clear paths while others succumbed to uncertainty, hesitating at the sight of increasing drifts. Frustration mounted when they recalled HOA Karen's decree against the snowplow. It seemed like a cruel act of fate that not only could they not remove snow effectively, but also that they had potentially put themselves in danger by adhering to rigid community rules. Families gathered in living rooms, exchanging nervous jokes about how cozy it was to be stuck indoors. But beneath the surface, a palpable tension simmered as the reality of their situation dawned on them. With roads impassable and stores soon expected to run low on supplies, concerns about food and necessities prompted whispers among neighbors about rallying together, if nothing else, then at least to check on one another during this perilous weather event. Meanwhile, HOA Karen remained oblivious to the growing desperation around her own home. Surrounded by her carefully manicured garden, now buried beneath layers of snow, she found herself trapped by her adherence to protocol. Where she typically reveled in her power over community standards, now a heavy realization loomed. With every new drift forming outside her windows, Karen's steadfast control was slipping away. As snow continued to fall throughout the night, engulfing houses and landscapes alike with its merciless grip, it became evident that this blizzard would impact more than just physical accessibility. It threatened to test the very fabric of community spirit itself. Would neighbors come together in defiance of rules or remain divided by regulations that no longer serve their needs? As the storm raged on, that answer lingered like a chill in the air, waiting for dawn's light to reveal what lay ahead for Maplewood Crest. As the blizzard raged on, Karen found herself grappling with an unexpected predicament. Having always prided herself on maintaining an immaculate home, she stood at her window, staring in dismay at the mounting snowdrifts that surrounded her property. What had once been neatly trimmed hedges and a pristine driveway was now a chaotic landscape of white, engulfing everything in its path and entirely concealing her meticulously manicured lawn. Determined not to be defeated, she donned her thick winter coat and stepped outside, her breath visible in the frigid air. With her trusty shovel in hand, her formidable tool against nature's whims, Karen approached her driveway, only to be met with an overwhelming wall of snow that seemed to laugh at her efforts. She began to dig, the cold rapidly seeping through her gloves, but each shovelful seemed trivial compared to the mountain before her. Frustration mounted as she worked tirelessly, her heart racing with anxiety about being unable to maintain her standards even at home. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself as the wind whipped around her, sending flurries of snow into her face. "How can I possibly allow my property to fall into disarray?" But with every shove of snow onto her front lawn, her progress felt painfully slow. The driveway remained stubbornly blocked. After what felt like hours of exhausting labor and no sign of victory, Karen paused to catch her breath. She glanced up and noticed the neighboring houses, with their windows glowing warmly from within, where families huddled together. A pang of envy hit her. They were likely sharing laughter and camaraderie while she battled the elements alone. The sight prompted a sinking realization. Without assistance, she would not clear the driveway in time for any potential emergency or even simple accessibility. With a heavy heart and gritted teeth, Karen reluctantly considered asking for help. Admitting vulnerability was not something she was accustomed to. Yet here she was, trapped amid her own rules and regulations. The irony weighed heavily on her. In seeking to enforce community standards and uphold traditions, she had inadvertently boxed herself into a corner. As if sensing her distress, a group of neighbors emerged from their homes equipped with shovels and determination. They called out to one another, strategizing how they could tackle their respective driveways collectively. For a brief moment, Karen hesitated, torn between her pride and the stark reality outside her front door. In that instant, it became evident that the blizzard had not just buried cars or obstructed doorways. It had blurred the lines of authority and challenged the very fabric of what it meant to be part of a community. Perhaps this storm could serve as a wake-up call for everyone involved, Karen included, as they realized that survival sometimes required unity over individualism. Would she accept help from those she had previously enforced rules upon? The answer loomed as invitingly as the snowflakes swirling around her, a question waiting to be answered amidst the storm's howling fury. As the snow continued to fall, blanketing Maplewood Crest in an unforgiving white, the protagonists found themselves grappling with a tumultuous internal conflict. Outside their window lay a scene of chaos and community spirit as neighbors rallied together to tackle the towering drifts blocking their driveways. Among that group was HOA Karen, who just hours ago had been the very person enforcing rules that had isolated them. The image of her struggling to clear her driveway stirred a blend of pity and frustration within the protagonist. The protagonist paced back and forth in their living room, wrestling with feelings of indignation over Karen's earlier actions, the ban on their snowplow that now felt trivial compared to the larger crisis facing everyone in Maplewood Crest. Why should I help her? They thought, recalling how Karen had insisted on removing what could have been a lifeline during the storm. Yet as they glanced again at the swirling snow outside, a more profound sense of community began to take root in their heart. The thoughts raced through their mind. Would helping Karen mean accepting her authority? Did extending a hand negate the grievances they felt for being wronged? But then another voice broke through, the spirit of camaraderie that seemed essential in times like these. "We're all in this together," whispered that inner voice, urging them toward empathy rather than resentment. Standing at the window, the protagonist felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness, not just for Karen, but also for all their neighbors who might need help navigating these dangerous conditions. They realized that while HOA Karen had enforced rules from a place of rigidity, she was still part of their community. Perhaps her need for assistance was an opportunity to bridge gaps between personal grievances and community needs. Driven by this newfound perspective, the protagonists donned their winter attire and stepped outside into the storm. They hesitated for a moment on their porch, but then spotted familiar faces working diligently among the swirling flakes. Janet and Tim from just down the block were pushing snow off their sidewalks with determination. With a resolve fueled by urgency, they approached. Do you guys need an extra pair of hands? They called out, aware this choice extended beyond simply helping with snow removal. It was about embodying unity amid adversity. As voices lifted above wind gusts and laughter echoed even through cautious exchanges, feelings of isolation began to thaw, both for themselves and for HOA Karen. Should they make amends with someone who had often seemed like an enemy? The answer felt simpler now as neighborhood bonds began to mend amidst hardship. Helping her might just spark a change not only in them but throughout Maplewood Crest. With newfound determination flooding their heart, they trudged toward Karen's home, a gesture signaling hope for reconciliation between individual grievances and collective harmony within a community bravely contending with the storm's fury. As the blizzard howled outside, the protagonists stood at the edge of their driveway, watching the chaos unfold. The camaraderie among neighbors warmed their heart, but as they glanced at the snow-laden landscape, frustration surged again. They remembered that earlier ultimatum from HOA Karen, how she had dismissed the snowplow's practicality when it was desperately needed now. Conflict brewed within. Should they use the very tool that had been banned, or let their feelings of resentment dictate their actions? But as they looked deeper into the storm's fury and saw families working together, a sense of clarity washed over them. This wasn't just about Karen or the snowplow. It was about survival and community in times of need. With newfound determination, they dashed back inside, grabbed their coat and boots, and headed for the garage. The snowplow sat there, gleaming with potential, waiting for its moment to shine. With the engine rumbling to life, a wave of exhilaration mingled with anxiety coursed through them. This is for everyone, they whispered to themselves as they maneuvered it out of the garage into the storm. The moment they hitched it up to the driveway, a surge of empowerment overshadowed their earlier misgivings. As they began to clear the first swath of snow from their driveway, watching it fly off to the sides like a cascading waterfall of white powder, a few neighbors paused to gawk in disbelief. Murmurs spread among them. Look, they're using their snowplow. With each pass along the road, clearing sidewalks and driveways, their hearts swelled with purpose. They could see other residents watching from their windows, peeking outside in astonishment as they worked tirelessly to carve paths through the growing drifts. Then they spotted HOA Karen struggling nearby. She was still trying to shovel her driveway by hand, progress painfully slow against a mountain of snow. Gritting their teeth but pushing aside any lingering resentment, they made a decision. It was time to include her in this unexpected rescue effort. Karen, they called out across the gusts that whipped around them. Get over here. Let me help you. At first, Karen hesitated, glancing back at her meticulously maintained yard, now buried beneath layers of snow. Her pride at stake, but desperation flickered in her eyes. She sheepishly accepted their offer and stepped toward them. Together, they cleared her driveway quickly. Soon enough, other neighbors joined in as well. Laughter echoed above the sound of engines revving and shovels scraping against pavement, a symphony of unity amidst adversity. As the storm raged on around them, barriers began to dissolve, not just those made of snow, but also personal ones that had divided them previously. The realization struck hard. Helping each other not only made survival possible, it ignited a spark of connection within Maplewood Crest that transcended regulations and grievances. By sunset's light filtering through swirling flakes, a path began to emerge, not just on driveways but within hearts as well, reminding everyone involved that togetherness always triumphs over isolation during life storms. In the days following the blizzard, the atmosphere in Maplewood Crest underwent a remarkable transformation. The storm had not only blanketed the neighborhood in snow, but it also reshaped relationships and perceptions among its residents. As the last traces of snow melted away, remnants of camaraderie lingered in the air, altering dynamics that had long been governed by rigidity and fear. News of the protagonist's decision to use their snowplow spread rapidly throughout the community, sparking conversations that ranged from gratitude to admiration. Neighbors who had previously harbored doubts about the protagonist now saw them as a hero, someone who had stepped up when it truly mattered. "Did you see how they helped clear Karen's driveway?" one resident remarked at the local coffee shop. "It was just what we needed, someone brave enough to take action." Meanwhile, HOA Karen found herself in an unfamiliar position. The blizzard had stripped away her defenses, revealing vulnerabilities she had long concealed beneath layers of authority. As she walked through the neighborhood, she could feel the shift in how residents viewed her. Where once there was apprehension and caution, now there was a mix of respect and empathy, especially after seeing her struggle alongside others to dig out from under the storm's aftermath. Karen's interactions with neighbors changed too. She found herself engaging in conversations she would have previously brushed off. At first hesitant, she began thanking those who had helped her during the blizzard, acknowledging the support she received with genuine appreciation. "I never thought I'd need help like this," she admitted to Janet, one of her staunchest critics. "But now I see how important it is to be part of a community." The protagonist noticed this change as well. They felt a sense of relief wash over them as they witnessed Karen's willingness to embrace vulnerability and accept assistance. It was as if the storm had acted as a catalyst for growth, not just for individuals but for the entire neighborhood. People began sharing stories of their experiences during the blizzard, recounting moments of kindness and collaboration that highlighted their collective resilience. As spring approached and life returned to its usual rhythm, the protagonist and HOA Karen found themselves on surprisingly amicable terms. They exchanged smiles during community meetings, where discussions shifted towards creating a more inclusive environment within Maplewood Crest. With open dialogue replacing strict enforcement, initiatives emerged that focused on collaboration rather than compliance. The blizzard became more than just a weather event. It served as a poignant reminder that unity is forged through adversity and that community spirit can flourish even in the harshest conditions. The once rigid lines drawn by rules and regulations now blur into something softer, a network of neighbors willing to support one another regardless of past grievances. Ultimately, both the protagonist and HOA Karen recognized that their actions during the storm prompted a change in narrative for Maplewood Crest. Together, they fostered an atmosphere where compassion reigned over control, ushering in a new era defined by shared responsibility and mutual respect among all residents. As spring emerged and the last remnants of snow melted away, residents of Maplewood Crest gathered at the community center for their first meeting following the blizzard. The atmosphere was noticeably lighter, smiles were shared, and conversations flowed more freely than they had in ages. People thanked each other for their support during the storm, recounting fond memories of teamwork and laughter amidst the chaos. At the front of the room, HOA Karen sat with an expression that blended humility and reflection. Gone was the rigidity that had characterized her leadership. Instead, she listened intently as neighbors spoke about their experiences during the blizzard, how they had come together, set aside differences, and helped one another when it mattered most. "Honestly, I never thought I'd say this," said one neighbor, a past critic of Karen's enforcement style, "but this storm taught me the importance of our community. It's not just about aesthetics, it's about safety and support." Nods of agreement rippled through the room as others echoed similar sentiments. With growing confidence, Karen stood up to address her neighbors. "I've realized that while rules have their place, they can't overshadow our responsibility to one another. This community is not just about maintaining property values. It's about building connections and helping each other through tough times." Her voice trembled slightly, but was met with warm applause from the gathered crowd. The discussion quickly shifted to potential changes in HOA regulations. Several residents proposed a review of rules related to winter equipment like snowplows, suggesting that practicality should be prioritized alongside aesthetics. Why not create guidelines that allow for necessary winter equipment? "It could save us all during storms," proposed Janet, who had previously been a vocal supporter of strict adherence to existing rules. Another neighbor chimed in, "What if we established a committee to focus on community needs first? We could actively engage residents to ensure everyone's voice is heard." Ideas flowed freely as residents brainstormed ways to foster an inclusive spirit while still respecting community standards. As these discussions unfolded, it became clear that the blizzard had catalyzed a fundamental shift in how residents viewed each other and their roles within the neighborhood. Themes of cooperation and understanding resonated throughout the meeting, reinforcing a collective commitment to nurturing Maplewood Crest as a supportive environment. By the end of the gathering, residents left feeling invigorated by a newfound sense of purpose. They embraced change not only within their HOA guidelines, but also within their hearts. The blizzard had proven that adversity could breed resilience and connection among individuals who once felt divided by rules. Together, they pledged to maintain open lines of communication moving forward, a promise to strive for balance between regulation and relationship building, ensuring that Maplewood Crest was more than just a neighborhood governed by strict rules, but rather a thriving community where everyone felt valued and supported. In this way, they transformed a challenging circumstance into an opportunity for growth and unity, an enduring lesson drawn from nature's fury that would resonate for years to come.